The silver chains burned against Seraphina's wrists as they dragged her toward the black SUV, but the pain in her heart cut deeper than any metal ever could. "Please," she whispered, twisting to look back at the only family she'd ever known. "I can work harder. I can." "Enough." Alpha Timothy Munwater's voice was cold as winter steel. "You should be grateful we're not throwing you to the rogues." Seraphina's knees hit the gravel driveway, sharp stones biting through her thin dress. Behind the mansion's gleaming windows, she could see Celeste watching with wide, tear-filled eyes, the perfect picture of a grieving sister. But Seraphina caught the flash of relief that crossed her adopted sister's face when she thought no one was looking. It had all happened so fast. One moment she was scrubbing the Kit Loveday floors, trying to stay invisible like always, and the next, Alpha Kael Blackthorne's men were at their door demanding payment for a debt she'd never known existed. "The Shadow Moon Pack doesn't wait," the lead enforcer had said, his scarred face emotionless. "Alpha Blackthorne wants his bride. Tonight." Luna Patricia had immediately pointed at Seraphina. "Take her. She's expendable." Expendable. 18 years of washing their clothes, cooking their meals, accepting their cruel words and dismissive looks, and she was expendable. "Sarah." Celeste's voice drifted from the doorway, sweet as poisoned honey. "I'm so sorry this is happening to you." The lie tasted bitter in the air between them. Seraphina had always known Celeste resented sharing even the smallest scrap of attention, but she'd never imagined her sister would watch her destruction with such quiet satisfaction. "How much?" Seraphina asked, struggling to her feet as the enforcers flanked her. "How much did they borrow?" Alpha Timothy exchanged a look with his Luna. 2 million. "Your father, your real father, had gambling debts. When he died, they transferred to us as your guardians." Another lie. Seraphina's parents had died protecting the pack from rogues. Everyone knew that story. But now, facing the cold truth in Timothy's eyes, she realized how many lies had shaped her life. "That's not," she started. "The debt grew with interest over 13 years, Timothy continued. "Kael Blackthorne is collecting." Seraphina's stomach dropped. Kael Blackthorne was a legend whispered about in the darkest corners of pack gatherings. The alpha who'd taken control of Shadow Moon at 17 after slaughtering his own father. The man who collected debts in blood and terror. "I could work," she tried again, desperation clawing at her throat. "I could pay it back. Give me time." "With what?" Luna Patricia laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. "You have nothing. You are nothing. At least this way, you're finally useful." The words hit like physical blows. Seraphina had spent 13 years trying to earn their love, their acceptance, their basic human decency. She believed that if she just worked harder, complained less, stayed smaller, they might finally see her as family. She'd been a fool. "The alpha is waiting," the scarred enforcer said, checking his watch. "We leave now." "Wait." Celeste stepped forward, her golden hair catching the porch light like a halo. For one wild moment, Seraphina thought her sister might actually help her. "Can I say goodbye?" The enforcer nodded curtly. Celeste approached with tears streaming down her face, the picture of sisterly devotion. She pulled Seraphina into a hug, her lips close to her ear. "Thank you," Celeste whispered, so quietly only Seraphina could hear. "For being exactly what I needed you to be." The words cut deeper than the chains. Seraphina pulled back, staring into Celeste's face, the face she'd loved like a true sister's, and saw nothing but cold calculation behind the manufactured tears. "I hate you," Seraphina whispered back. Celeste's smile was small and victorious. "I know." The enforcers hauled Seraphina toward the SUV. Behind her, she could hear Luna Patricia comforting Celeste, promising her that everything would be fine now, that the terrible burden of their adopted daughter was finally lifted. As they shoved her into the back seat, Seraphina caught one last glimpse of the Moonwater mansion, the place that had never been home, filled with people who had never been family. Celeste stood in the doorway now, no longer bothering with tears, watching with satisfied eyes as the SUV pulled away. The chains around Seraphina's wrists seemed to tighten as they drove into the darkness, carrying her toward a fate she couldn't imagine and a man whose very name made grown wolves tremble. But for the first time in 13 years, she wasn't trying to make herself smaller. Alpha Kael Blackthorne wanted a bride? Fine. He could have one. Just not the broken, grateful girl the Moonwater Pack thought they were sending him. Chapter 2. The first thing Seraphina noticed about Alpha Kael Blackthorne wasn't his legendary scars or his intimidating size. It was how utterly silent he could be while radiating enough menace to make her wolf whimper in terror. He stood in the shadows of the Shadow Moon Pack's main hall like death incarnate, watching as his men dragged her through the massive oak doors. The chains around her wrists had rubbed her skin raw during the 3-hour drive, but she barely felt the pain. Every instinct screamed at her to submit, to drop her eyes, to make herself as small and unthreatening as possible. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze head-on. Alpha Kael stepped into the light, and Seraphina's breath caught. He was younger than she'd expected, maybe 28 or 30, with black hair and eyes the color of winter storms. 3 parallel scars ran from his left temple to his jaw, and his hands bore the calluses of someone who'd never stopped fighting. But it was the cold intelligence in his stare that made her stomach drop. This wasn't a mindless brute. This was a predator who calculated every move. So, he said, his voice like gravel over silk. This is what the Moonwater Pack considers payment for $2 million. The way he looked at her, like she was livestock being evaluated for slaughter, sent fury shooting up her spine. I'm worth more than they ever gave me credit for. Several pack members chuckled darkly. The sound echoed off the stone walls, making the massive hall feel like a tomb. Kael raised an eyebrow. Are you? Guess you'll find out. The hall went dead silent. Seraphina could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. She'd just mouthed off to the most dangerous alpha in 3 states, and every wolf in the room was waiting to see if he'd rip her throat out. Instead, Kael smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Beta Timothy, he said without taking his eyes off Seraphina. Show our guest to her room. A mountain of a man stepped forward, his scarred face blank. This had to be the Beta the rumor spoke of, Timothy Steele, who'd supposedly killed 30 rogues with his bare hands during the border wars. He reached for Seraphina's arm with hands the size of dinner plates. Gently, Kael said, his tone casual but edged with warning. Timothy's grip loosened immediately. He guided Seraphina toward a stone staircase, his touch firm but not bruising. The small mercy confused her. Everything about this place screamed military precision and brutal efficiency, yet the Alpha had just protected her from unnecessary roughness. This way, Timothy rumbled, leading her up 2 flights of stairs. The Shadow Moon Packhouse was nothing like the Moonwater Mansion's gleaming surfaces and fake warmth. Here, everything was stone and steel and shadow. Weapons lined the walls, swords, axes, knives arranged in deadly patterns. The few pack members they passed moved with the fluid grace of trained killers, their eyes sharp and assessing. This wasn't just a pack. It was an army. Timothy stopped at a heavy wooden door. Your room. Seraphina expected a cell, maybe a basement storage area. Instead, she found herself in a spacious bedroom with a real bed, clean linens, and a fireplace already crackling with warmth. A small bathroom adjoined the main room, complete with hot water and toiletries. Dinner's at 7, Timothy said, removing her chains with surprising gentleness. Don't be late. He left without another word, but Seraphina heard the lock click into place. So she was a prisoner, just a comfortable one. She sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to process what had happened. This morning she'd been scrubbing floors in the Moonwater Packhouse. Tonight she was locked in the bedroom of the most feared alpha in the region, promised to him like some medieval bride. The absurdity of it might have made her laugh if terror wasn't clawing at her throat. A soft knock interrupted her spiraling thoughts. Come in, she called, then remembered she was locked in. I mean. The door opened anyway. A young woman around Seraphina's age entered carrying an armload of clothes. She had the lean build of a warrior but kind eyes, her brown hair pulled back in a practical braid. "I'm Elena," she said, setting the clothes on the bed. "I brought you some things that might fit." Seraphina fingered the soft wool of a sweater, the sturdy denim of well-made jeans. Everything looked warm and practical, nothing like the threadbare hand-me-downs she'd worn at Moonwater. "Thank you. These are nice." "Alpha's orders," Elena said with a shrug. "He said you'd need proper clothes for the territory. Gets cold here in the mountains." "Another small mercy." Seraphina studied Elena's face, looking for signs of hostility or resentment. Most pack members despised outsiders, especially ones forced on them. But Elena just seemed matter-of-fact about the whole situation. "How long have you been here?" Seraphina asked. "Since I was 15. My pack was destroyed by rogues. Alpha Kael took in the survivors." Elena's expression darkened. "He's not what people say about him. I mean, he is, but he's also fair. Protective of his people." "Am I his people now?" Elena hesitated. "I don't know. But you're here, and you're alive, and that's something." After Elena left, Seraphina changed into the new clothes. Everything fit perfectly, as if someone had guessed her measurements exactly. The thought of Kael studying her body closely enough to know her size made heat creep up her neck. Dinner was served in a hall that could seat 200 people but currently held maybe 40. Seraphina entered to find every conversation stop and every eye turn to her. The pack's assessment was swift and brutal. They saw a small, weak outsider who'd been foisted on them through no choice of their own. She lifted her chin and walked to the only empty seat, which happened to be at the head table next to Alpha Kael. "Brave little wolf," he murmured as she sat down. "Or just stupid?" "Haven't decided yet," she replied, earning a few chuckles from nearby pack members. The meal was simple but hearty: roasted meat, fresh bread, vegetables that actually had flavor. Seraphina ate carefully, aware that every bite was being watched and judged. At Moonwater, she'd eaten scraps and leftovers when no one was looking. This felt dangerously like being treated as an equal. "Tell me about your parents," Kael said suddenly. Seraphina nearly choked on her bread. "What? Your real parents? The ones who died when you were 5. "I don't remember much. They died in a rogue attack defending the pack." The standard story, the one she'd been told 1,000 times. Kael's eyes sharpened. "What were their names?" "Thomas and Marie Carson." "No," Kael said quietly. "They weren't." The bread turned to ash in her mouth. "What?" "Your parents were Thomas and Marie Sterling. They were researchers, not fighters. They were killed because they discovered something they shouldn't have." The hall had gone silent again, every pack member straining to listen. Seraphina felt the world tilt sideways. "That's not, the Moonwater Pack would have told me. The Moonwater Pack has been lying to you for 13 years. Rage and confusion warred in her chest. "Why would they?" "Because your parents found evidence that several packs have been covering up something big. Something that could destroy the current power structure." Kael leaned closer, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "They died for it. And you've been hidden in plain sight ever since." Seraphina's hands trembled. Everything she thought she knew about her life, her identity, her family's death, all lies. "What did they find?" "I don't know. But I intend to find out." Kael stood abruptly. "Finish your meal. We have work to do." He led her from the dining hall through a maze of corridors to a massive library-lined floor to ceiling with ancient books. The smell of old leather and parchment filled the air, along with something else, something that made her wolf stir restlessly. "Your parents were here once," Kael said, running his fingers along the spine of a particularly old tome. "They studied these texts for weeks before they died." "What kind of texts?" "Ancient pack histories. Laws. Bloodline records." He pulled down a leather-bound book that looked centuries old. Written in the old language. Most wolves can't read them anymore. Seraphina approached the book cautiously. The moment she saw the strange symbols covering the pages, something clicked in her mind like a key turning in a lock. The markings weren't just random scratches, they were words, sentences, stories. She could read them. The 7 Sacred Bonds, she said softly, translating the title without thinking. A chronicle of the first packs and their divine compact. Kael went very still. What did you just say? Seraphina looked up to find him staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. I translated the title. The 7 Sacred Bonds. That's impossible. His voice was barely above a whisper. No one has been able to read the old language for over 2 centuries. I've had scholars, historians, even seers try to translate these books. But Seraphina was already turning pages, the ancient words flowing through her mind like water. Stories of the first werewolves, their bonds with moon spirits, the sacred laws that govern pack life. And there, buried in a passage about bloodlines and inherited gifts. Oh God, she breathed. What? Kael moved to look over her shoulder, close enough that she could feel his heat. It says here that the ability to read the old language is inherited. It passes down through certain bloodlines that were supposedly wiped out centuries ago. She looked up at him, pieces of a terrible puzzle clicking into place. My parents weren't just researchers. They were descendants of the lost bloodlines. Kael's face had gone pale. If that's true, then someone's been systematically hunting my family for generations. Seraphina's hands shook as she turned another page. And they killed my parents to keep them from finding out why. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. Finally, Kael spoke. Can you read more? Seraphina nodded, her heart pounding. Whatever her parents had discovered, whatever had gotten them killed, the answers were in these books. And she was the only one who could find them. Then we worked together, Kael said, his voice hard with determination. You help me uncover the truth, and I'll help you get justice for your parents. It wasn't exactly an alliance built on trust. But as Seraphina looked into his storm-gray eyes, she realized it might be the only chance she had to learn who she really was, and why everyone seemed so desperate to keep her from finding out. Chapter 3. The alarm that shrieked through the Shadow Moon packhouse at 3 in the morning meant only one thing: rogues. Seraphina bolted upright in bed, her heart hammering as boots thundered past her door. Shouts echoed through the corridors, followed by the sound of weapons being grabbed from the armory downstairs. She'd been at Shadow Moon for 2 weeks now, long enough to know that when the alarm sounded, everyone fought. No exceptions. Even prisoners. She yanked on jeans and boots, then tried her door. Unlocked. Elena must have come by during the night shift change. Seraphina ran toward the commotion, following the stream of warriors heading for the main entrance. 30 rogues, maybe more, she heard Beta Timothy report to Alpha Kael. They hit the south perimeter first, but it was a diversion. Main force is coming from the east. Coordinated attack, Kael replied grimly, strapping on body armor over his black shirt. Someone's feeding them information about our defenses. The possibility of a traitor sent ice through Seraphina's veins. She'd grown attached to this place despite herself, to the straightforward honesty of pack members who said exactly what they thought. The idea that someone here was betraying that trust made her stomach twist. Seraphina. Kael's voice cut through the chaos. What are you doing here? I want to help. Several pack members snorted with laughter. A few looked genuinely concerned for her mental health. You don't have a wolf, Timothy said bluntly. You'll just get yourself killed. I do have a wolf. The words came out harder than she'd intended. She's just different. Kael studied her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. Stay behind the main line. If things go bad, you run. Understood? Understood. The battle was chaos and blood and the stench of rogue wolves who'd lost all connection to humanity. Seraphina had never seen anything like it. The Shadow Moon warriors moved like a pack in truth, covering each other's backs, flowing around the enemy like water around stones. But there were so many rogues, and they fought with the desperate fury of creatures with nothing left to lose. She hung back as ordered, watching Kael tear through 3 rogues with deadly efficiency. He was magnificent and terrifying, every movement calculated to kill. But even he couldn't be everywhere at once. Elena went down hard, a massive rogue's claws raking across her chest. The wounds were deep, pumping blood onto the forest floor. The young woman who'd been kind to Seraphina from the first day was dying, and no one else was close enough to help. Something inside Seraphina snapped. She didn't remember shifting. One moment she was human, the next she was running on 4 legs toward Elena's still form. But these weren't the paws she'd expected. Instead of the brown or gray coat that ran in her adoptive family, silver fur gleamed in the moonlight. And the power that flowed through her wasn't the weak, late-blooming strength Timothy had dismissively mentioned. This was something else entirely. She reached Elena just as the rogue turned for a killing blow. Seraphina slammed into the creature's side, sending it tumbling into a tree trunk with enough force to snap its neck. Around her, the battle seemed to pause as every wolf, rogue and pack member alike, stared at the silver wolf that had appeared from nowhere. Seraphina ignored them all. She placed her muzzle against Elena's wounds and felt the power flow out of her like warm honey. The bleeding stopped first, then the gashes began to close. Within minutes, Elena was sitting up, whole and healthy, staring at Seraphina with wonder. "Impossible," someone whispered. A roar of fury brought Seraphina's attention back to the battle. The rogue alpha, a massive gray beast with yellow eyes, was charging straight for her. She braced herself, but Kael got there first. The 2 alphas collided with enough force to shake the ground, rolling and snapping in a deadly dance. The rogue was bigger, but Kael was smarter. He used the creature's momentum against it, rolling away at the last second to let his opponent crash into another tree. Before the rogue could recover, Kael's jaws closed around its throat. The battle was over. Seraphina shifted back to human form, suddenly aware that she was naked and surrounded by staring pack members. Elena quickly wrapped her in a jacket, but the damage was done. Everyone had seen the silver wolf. Everyone had seen the healing. "Well," Beta Timothy said finally. "That's new." The pack meeting 3 hours later was unlike anything Seraphina had ever experienced. Instead of sitting in the back corner like usual, she found herself at the head table next to Kael, facing 40 curious and somewhat unsettled faces. "A silver wolf hasn't been seen in over 300 years, Dr. Sarah Loveday, the pack's historian, reported. She was a small, precise woman who treated werewolf lore like a science. And healing abilities, there are Lu. Chapter 4. The pictures were already waiting on Kael's desk when Seraphina stumbled down to his office, her head still pounding from whatever Celeste had slipped into her tea. She knew something was catastrophically wrong the moment she saw his face. Gone was any trace of the warmth that had been growing between them. Instead, he looked at her with the cold fury of a man who'd been played for a fool. "Explain this." His voice was arctic as he turned his laptop screen toward her. Seraphina's stomach dropped. The photos showed her in bed with someone, a man whose face was conveniently turned away from the camera. Her shirt was unbuttoned, his hands on her skin, their bodies positioned to suggest intimate contact. To anyone looking, it would seem like she'd been caught in a passionate affair. "That's not what happened," she said immediately. "Kael, I swear to you, that's not." "Not what?" "Not you in bed with another man?" His gray eyes were like winter storms. "Because that certainly looks like you." "Someone drugged me." Celeste put something in the tea, and then. "Celeste?" Kael's laugh was bitter. "Your sister who drove 6 hours to check on you? Who was worried sick about your well-being?" "She's not my sister." The words exploded out of her. "She's never been my sister. She hates me, and she did this to destroy what I've found here." What you found here? Kael stood slowly, his considerable height making the space feel smaller. What exactly did you think you'd found, Seraphina? The way he said her name, like it tasted sour, made something crack inside her chest. I thought maybe I'd found a place where I mattered. Where someone might actually care about you. He walked around the desk until he was standing too close, using his size to intimidate. Is that what you thought this was? Some kind of fairy tale where the beast falls for the beauty? Don't. Her voice broke. Don't do this. You played me perfectly, Kael continued, his voice getting colder with each word. The innocent act, the wide-eyed gratitude, the way you threw yourself into helping the pack. Was any of it real? All of it was real. Then explain the photos. I can't explain them because I don't remember them. Desperation clawed at her throat. Someone set this up. Someone wanted you to see exactly what you're seeing. Someone. Kael's tone made it clear he didn't believe her. How convenient that you remember nothing. Test me, she said frantically. Test my blood. You'll find traces of whatever drug. Enough. The word came out like a physical blow. I've heard enough lies. Beta Timothy appeared in the doorway, his face grim. Alpha? Is everything all right? Escort Seraphina to the territory border, Kael said without taking his eyes off her face. She's no longer welcome in Shadow Moon lands. The words hit her like bullets. Kael, please. Just listen to me. I am listening. And what I'm hearing is a woman who'll say anything to avoid the consequences of her choices. He turned away from her, dismissing her as easily as throwing away trash. You have 1 hour to gather your things. After that, if you're found on my territory, you'll be treated as a rogue. Timothy's hand settled on her shoulder, not unkindly but with unmistakable finality. Come on. Let's get you packed. Seraphina wanted to fight, to scream, to shift and tear apart everything in the room until someone listened to her. Instead, she let Timothy lead her away, knowing that any protest would only make her look more guilty. Behind them, she heard Kael's voice, quiet but carrying, and Timothy? Make sure she understands that this banishment is permanent. An hour later, Seraphina stood at the edge of Shadow Moon territory with a single bag containing the clothes Elena had given her. Everything else, the sense of belonging, the growing hope, the possibility of love, lay in ruins behind her. Timothy had driven her to the border in silence, his usual gruff kindness replaced by professional distance. Even he believed the photos. Even he thought she was capable of such betrayal. For what it's worth, he said as she climbed out of the truck, I'm sorry it ended this way. Are you? She turned to face him. Or are you relieved that the outsider is finally gone? Timothy's expression didn't change. The Alpha's word is law. Even when the Alpha is wrong? Especially then. He put the truck in reverse. Take care of yourself, Seraphina. And stay out of pack territories. Most Alphas aren't as merciful as Kael. Merciful. As if destroying her heart and casting her out like garbage was mercy. Seraphina watched the truck disappear, then shouldered her bag and started walking. She had no destination, no plan, no idea where to go or what to do next. For the first time in her life, she was completely alone. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd spent 18 years feeling like an outsider in her adoptive family, and the moment she'd found somewhere she might belong, it had been ripped away. Her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Hope flared in her chest. Maybe Kael had realized his mistake, maybe someone had found evidence of the setup, but the caller ID made her blood freeze. Celeste. For a moment, Seraphina considered ignoring it. But she needed answers, and Celeste was the only one who could provide them. Hello, little sister, Celeste's voice was warm honey with poison underneath. How are you settling into your new life as a rogue? What did you do? Seraphina's voice came out hoarse. I protected my family, Celeste said simply. You were always a threat, Sarah. Even when you were small and broken and trying so hard to please everyone. I knew eventually you'd become a problem. I saved Elena's life. I helped win a battle. How was I a threat? Oh, sweetie. Celeste's laugh was like breaking glass. You really don't know, do you? You have no idea what you actually are. What are you talking about? A silver wolf with healing powers? Do you know how rare that is? How dangerous? You could have challenged Alpha Kael's authority just by existing. And the way he looked at you. Celeste's voice turned ugly. Like you were something precious. Something worth protecting. Seraphina's heart clenched. Had Kael really looked at her that way? It didn't matter now. So you destroyed it, she said. I fixed a problem before it became a crisis. The photos were easy enough to arrange. A little drug in your tea, one of my male friends from back home who owed me a favor, some careful positioning. Poor Alpha Kael was so ready to believe the worst when I suggested you might be using him. You suggested. Oh yes. I planted seeds all week. How you'd always been boy crazy back home. How you'd throw yourself at any male who showed you attention. How desperate you were for affection. Celeste's satisfaction was sickening. By the time he saw those photos, he was primed to believe exactly what I wanted him to believe. Rage built in Seraphina's chest like a living thing. Why? Why do you hate me so much? Because you never knew your place. Celeste's composure finally cracked. 18 years I had to share my parents, my home, my life with some pathetic orphan who should have been grateful for scraps. And still it wasn't enough for you. You had to be special. You had to have powers that I'll never have. I never asked for any of this. No, you just took it. Like you took everything else. Celeste's voice turned cold again. But don't worry. You won't be a problem anymore. No pack will take in a banished wolf, especially one with your reputation. You'll die alone in the wilderness, just like you deserve. The line went dead. Seraphina stood in the empty road, phone clutched in her trembling hand, and felt something inside her shatter completely. Not just her heart, that had broken when Kael looked at her with disgust. This was deeper. This was the last thread connecting her to the hope that maybe, somewhere, someone might care about her. She was completely alone. And for the first time in her life, she was angry enough to embrace it. 3 days later, Seraphina was setting up camp in an abandoned cabin when she caught the scent of another wolf. She tensed, ready to run. Rogues were dangerous, and she was in no condition to fight, but the wolf that emerged from the tree line was ancient and clearly alone. He shifted to human form, revealing a man who looked to be in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes. His clothes were worn but clean, and he moved with the careful dignity of someone who'd seen too much of the world. Easy, young one, he said, raising his hands peacefully. I mean no harm. What do you want? Seraphina's voice was hoarse from disuse. To talk. I've been looking for you for a very long time. I don't know you. No, but I knew your parents. Your real parents. The old man sat down on a fallen log, moving carefully. My name is Gabriel Sterling. I was your father's beta. Seraphina's breath caught. My father had a beta? Your father was Alpha King Timothy Sterling. The last of the royal bloodline. Gabriel's eyes were sad. And you, child, are his daughter. The rightful heir to the werewolf throne. The world tilted sideways. That's impossible. My parents were researchers. They died in a rogue attack. Your parents were murdered, Gabriel said gently. Assassinated because certain packs couldn't allow the royal line to continue. They wanted the old monarchy dead so they could divide power among themselves. But the Moonwater Pack took you in as part of the conspiracy. They were supposed to hide you until you could be quietly disposed of. But Alpha Timothy grew greedy. Instead of killing you, he kept you as a servant and stole your inheritance. Seraphina sank onto a nearby rock, her legs no longer able to support her. Inheritance? The royal treasury. Millions of dollars that should have been yours when you came of age. The debt they claimed to owe Alpha Kael? That was your money they'd been spending for 13 years. Everything clicked into place with sickening clarity. The way the Moonwater Pack had treated her like property instead of family. The convenient debt that had led to her being traded away. Celeste's desperate need to keep her powerless and broken. They'd stolen her birthright and made her grateful for the scraps. How do you know all this? She asked. Because I've been watching. Waiting. Hoping that one day you'd manifest the royal abilities and I could approach you safely. Gabriel's eyes were bright with unshed tears. You're the last hope for our people, child. The packs have been without a true ruler for too long. They're fragmenting, growing corrupt, forgetting the old laws that kept us civilized. I don't want to be a queen, Seraphina said numbly. I just wanted to belong somewhere. I know. But sometimes what we want and what we're meant for are two different things. Gabriel stood slowly. There's something else you need to know. Alpha Kael, he's not part of the conspiracy. His father was, but Kael himself is clean. He genuinely didn't know who you were. The mention of Kael's name sent fresh pain through her chest. It doesn't matter. He made his choice. Did he? Or did he make the choice your enemies wanted him to make? Seraphina looked up sharply. What do you mean? Think about it, child. You appear in his territory. You show royal abilities. You start to matter to him. And then suddenly, conveniently, there's evidence of betrayal that destroys his trust in you completely? Gabriel shook his head. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. You think they wanted him to banish me? I think they wanted you isolated and vulnerable. Cut off from the one alpha strong enough to protect you. Gabriel's expression was grim. And I think they're planning to finish what they started 18 years ago. As if on cue, Seraphina's sensitive hearing picked up the sound of engines in the distance. Multiple vehicles, moving fast. They found us, Gabriel said, his face going pale. Who found us? The ones who killed your parents. The ones who've been hunting you your whole life. Gabriel grabbed her arm. Run, Your Highness. Run, and don't stop until you reach someone who can protect you. I'm not leaving you. You are, Gabriel said firmly. Because you're the future of our people, and I'm an old man who's already lived his life. The sound of engines was getting closer. There's a safe house 50 miles north. Gabriel pressed a piece of paper into her hand. Go there. Contact Alpha Kael. Tell him what I've told you. He won't believe me. He will, Gabriel said with surprising confidence. Because by now, he's starting to realize he was played. How do you know? Gabriel smiled sadly. Because I know what it looks like when a man realizes he's destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. The engines were very close now. Go, Gabriel urged. Go, and reclaim what's yours. For the first time in days, Seraphina felt something other than despair. It wasn't hope, not yet. But it was anger. Clean, bright fury at everyone who tried to control her, use her, destroy her. They wanted a queen. Fine. They could have one. But she was going to be the kind of queen they'd never expected, the kind that conquered rather than begged for acceptance. Gabriel, she said as she prepared to shift and run. Yes, Your Highness. When I come back, I'm coming back with an army. And for the first time since the photos had appeared on Kael's desk, Seraphina smiled. Chapter 5. The silver wolf that emerged from the forest clearing wasn't the same creature that had fled Shadow Moon territory 3 months ago. This wolf moved with lethal grace, every step radiating the kind of authority that made other predators step aside. When she shifted back to human form, Seraphina Sterling, no longer the scared girl who'd answered to the name her captors had given her, stood tall and commanding in the dawn light. Again, she called to the small group of wolves watching from the tree-line. And this time, don't hold back because you think I'm fragile. Timothy, a young male who'd been cast out from his pack for challenging a corrupt alpha, shifted uneasily. Your Highness, we don't want to hurt. You can't hurt me, Seraphina interrupted, her voice carrying the ring of absolute certainty. Not anymore. But if you keep treating me like glass, you're not helping me become what I need to be. Gabriel Sterling emerged from the cabin that had become their training base, approval evident in his weathered features. 3 months of intensive training had transformed his lost princess into something magnificent and terrifying. Gone was the submissive girl who'd begged for scraps of affection. In her place stood a woman who commanded respect simply by breathing. She's right, Gabriel told the assembled group of outcasts and rogues who'd sworn themselves to her service. The old bloodline doesn't just carry healing powers. It carries the authority to rule. And our queen needs to learn to use every weapon at her disposal. Seraphina nodded grimly. The first month had been the hardest, unlearning 18 years of conditioning that told her to make herself smaller, quieter, less threatening. Gabriel had been ruthless in breaking down those mental barriers, forcing her to embrace the royal power that sang in her blood. The ability to heal is just the beginning, he told her during one particularly brutal training session. Your ancestors could command pack bonds, compel truth, even influence the shift itself. These powers have been dormant in your line for generations, but they're awakening in you. He'd been right. As Seraphina had grown stronger physically, her abilities had expanded in ways that sometimes frightened her. She could sense lies now, feel the emotional bonds between pack members like threads of light. And when she gave a direct command, even the strongest wolves found it nearly impossible to disobey. Your Highness, a female voice called from the edge of camp. Tara, a former pack doctor who'd been exiled for treating rogues, approached with obvious urgency. We have a problem. Seraphina felt the shift in atmosphere immediately. Whatever Tara had discovered, it was serious. What is it? I've been monitoring pack communications like you asked. There's news from Moonwater territory. Tara's expression was grim. They've declared you dead. The words hit like a physical blow. Even though Seraphina had expected something like this, hearing it confirmed made her stomach drop. Show me, she said. Tara led her to the communication station they'd set up in the main cabin. The equipment was military grade, salvaged from a rogue attack on a government facility. On the screen was a news report from the Regional Pack Council. The tragic death of Seraphina Carson, adopted daughter of Alpha Timothy Moonwater, the reporter was saying. According to Pack officials, Miss Carson was killed in a rogue attack while traveling between territories. Her body was never recovered, but witnesses confirmed the attack was fatal. Celeste appeared on screen next, her face a perfect mask of grief. Sarah was like a real sister to me, she said, dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue. She was always so brave, so determined to help others. I just wish she'd been more careful. Lying bitch, Tara muttered. Seraphina watched in cold fury as the report continued. Alpha Timothy and Luna Patricia spoke about their beloved adopted daughter, painting a picture of a cherished family member whose loss had devastated them. Every word was a lie, every tear was manufactured. But the worst part came at the end. Miss Carson's inheritance from her biological parents will now be distributed according to Pack law, the reporter concluded. As her nearest surviving relative, Miss Celeste Moonwater will inherit the substantial estate. How much? Seraphina asked quietly. Gabriel checked his notes. According to our sources, they're claiming the inheritance is worth about $3 million. And the real amount? Closer to $50 million, including properties, investments, and the royal treasury. Gabriel's voice was tight with anger. They've been stealing from you for 18 years, and now they're making it official. Seraphina stared at the screen for a long moment, watching Celeste's performance. Her adoptive sister looked appropriately mourning while discussing the burden of inheriting Seraphina's estate. The lies came so easily, so naturally, that Seraphina wondered if Celeste even remembered what truth felt like anymore. There's more, Tara said reluctantly. My contact in the Shadow Moon Pack says Alpha Kael has been looking for you. Searching every territory, following every lead. Something clenched in Seraphina's chest. Looking for me? Apparently he figured out the photos were staged. Found the male who posed with you, some friend of Celeste's who bragged about the setup in the wrong bar. Tara's expression softened slightly. Word is, he's been tearing himself apart with guilt. Good, Seraphina said, but the word tasted like ash. Despite everything, despite the way he'd thrown her away without a second thought, she couldn't completely kill what she'd felt for Kael. He deserves to suffer, Gabriel said firmly. He chose to believe the worst of you instead of trusting what he knew to be true. Yes, he did. Seraphina turned away from the screen. And now he gets to live with that choice. But even as she said it, she couldn't ignore the part of her that wondered what might have happened if Kael had just listened. If he'd trusted her enough to investigate instead of immediately believing the worst. It didn't matter now. She wasn't the same person who'd loved him. That girl was gone, buried under months of training and the weight of royal responsibility. We need to accelerate our timeline, she said, shifting back into command mode. If they've declared me officially dead, they'll move faster to consolidate power. How many do we have now? 47 sworn to your service, Gabriel reported. Another dozen who've expressed interest but haven't committed yet. And pack support? 6 smaller packs have indicated they'd recognize your claim if you can prove your bloodline. The larger packs are still playing wait and see. Seraphina nodded. It wasn't an army yet, but it was a start. What about the evidence we've been gathering? Financial records proving the theft, DNA confirmation of your parentage, testimonies from wolves who knew your parents. Tara ticked off the items on her fingers. Plus the communication intercepts showing coordination between the major packs to suppress the royal line. Is it enough? Gabriel considered. It's enough to cast serious doubt on the current power structure. Whether it's enough to restore the monarchy. He shrugged. That depends on how much support you can rally. Seraphina walked to the window, looking out at the small camp that had become her kingdom. 47 wolves who'd sworn themselves to a dead girl's cause. It wasn't much, but it was more than she'd had 3 months ago. And she was no longer the frightened young woman who'd begged Kael to believe her innocence. Tara, I want you to reach out to every contact you have in the medical community. Make sure they know what Celeste did with those drugs, what the Moonwater Pack has been covering up. Seraphina's voice was steady, controlled. Gabriel, contact the smaller packs who've expressed interest. Tell them it's time to choose sides. And then? Gabriel asked. Seraphina smiled, and there was nothing soft or uncertain about it. Then we go home. The first sign that something had changed came when Seraphina walked into the neutral territory bar where she'd arranged to meet with potential allies. Conversation stopped mid-sentence as every wolf in the place turned to look at her. She wasn't trying to be intimidating. She was simply being herself, the self she discovered under Gabriel's ruthless training. But the effect was immediate and unmistakable. Wolves who'd never seen her before found themselves straightening up, their natural instincts responding to the authority that radiated from her like heat. Holy shit, someone whispered. Is that really her? The wolves she'd come to meet, representatives from 3 smaller packs who'd been hesitant to commit to her cause, were staring with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Your Highness, the spokesman, Alpha David from the Copper Creek Pack, managed to say. You look different. I am different, Seraphina replied simply. She took the offered chair, noting how the other patrons unconsciously shifted to give her more space. The question is whether you're ready to be different too. For the next hour, she laid out her plans with clinical precision. The evidence against the conspirators, the timeline for revealing her identity, the political restructuring that would follow. She spoke with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted the outcome, and by the end of the meeting, all 3 packs had pledged their support. As they prepared to leave, Alpha David lingered behind. Ma'am, he said quietly, I have to ask. The stories about Alpha Kael searching for you, is there any truth to them? Seraphina's expression didn't change. Alpha Kael made his position clear when he banished me from his territory. But if he's realized his mistake. Then he's learned a valuable lesson about the consequences of choosing prejudice over trust. Seraphina stood, ending the conversation. Good evening, Alpha David. She walked out of the bar with her head high, leaving behind a room full of wolves who were still staring after her with something approaching reverence. Outside, Gabriel was waiting by their vehicle. How did it go? All 3 packs are in, Seraphina reported. That brings our total support to 9 packs and counting. And Kael? What about him? Gabriel studied her face. You know he's been looking for you. Tara's contacts say he's been half mad with guilt, tearing apart every territory looking for some trace of where you went. His guilt doesn't change what he did. No, Gabriel agreed. But it might change what he does next. Seraphina got into the passenger seat, closing the door with perhaps more force than necessary. It doesn't matter what he does next. I'm not the same person he threw away. No, Gabriel said quietly as he started the engine. You're not. You're exactly what this world needs, a queen who won't be broken by the first betrayal. As they drove through the night toward their next meeting, Seraphina caught her reflection in the side mirror. Gabriel was right. The scared, desperate girl who'd begged for Kael's trust was gone. In her place was someone harder, stronger, infinitely more dangerous. Someone who commanded rather than begged. Someone who took what was hers instead of hoping it would be given. The Silver Queen was rising, and this time, no one would be able to tear her down. 3 days later, Seraphina stood on a hilltop overlooking the Moonwater Pack territory. Below, she could see the mansion where she'd spent 18 years believing she was nothing. Where Celeste was probably at this very moment, enjoying the inheritance stolen from Seraphina's murdered parents. It was time to go home. But she wouldn't be going as the broken girl who'd left. She'd be returning as exactly what she was, the rightful heir to a throne that had been stolen, a queen who'd been forged in betrayal and emerged stronger than anyone had imagined possible. Ready, Your Highness? Gabriel asked. Seraphina smiled, feeling the silver wolf stir beneath her skin, eager for the hunt. Let's remind them what royal authority really looks like. Chapter 6. The first thing Celeste noticed when the ballroom doors opened wasn't the woman who walked through them, it was the way every conversation in the room died like someone had cut the power. Celeste stood frozen at the center of her engagement party, her hand still extended toward her fiancé Richard Blackwood, son of the influential Northern Pack Alpha. The champagne glass in her other hand trembled as she watched a figure in silver emerge from the shadows of the doorway. The woman approaching looked familiar, but wrong. Like a photograph that had been retouched until only the basic features remained the same. This wasn't the broken, desperate girl Celeste had destroyed 3 months ago. This was something else entirely. Hello, sister, Seraphina said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. I hope you don't mind me crashing your party. I brought gifts. The champagne glass slipped from Celeste's fingers, shattering against the marble floor. Around the room, the gathered werewolf nobility, alphas, lunas, and their heirs from across 3 states, stared in shock at the woman who was supposed to be dead. Seraphina moved through the crowd with predatory grace, and Celeste felt her wolf whimper in submission. Whatever had happened during those missing months, Seraphina had become something that made every instinct scream danger. Impossible, Luna Patricia whispered from across the room. You're dead. We have witnesses. Do you? Seraphina smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. Funny thing about witnesses. They have a tendency to tell the truth when properly motivated. She reached into her silver clutch and pulled out a tablet, the screen already displaying legal documents. I thought you might be interested in seeing these. Financial records showing systematic theft from my inheritance over the past 13 years. DNA evidence confirming my true parentage. And my personal favorite, recorded confessions from several pack members about their involvement in covering up my parents' murder. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Celeste could feel the weight of 200 pairs of eyes shifting between her and the ghost of her dead sister. You have no proof of anything, Alpha Timothy said, but his voice lacked conviction. These are the fabrications of a disturbed young woman. Are they? Seraphina touched the tablet screen, and a voice filled the room. Timothy's voice, recorded in crystal clarity. The girl can never know the truth about her parents. If she discovers her royal bloodline, everything we've built will come crashing down. The other alphas won't stand for it, they'll demand the monarchy be restored. The recording continued, laying out the conspiracy in devastating detail. How they'd taken in the 5-year-old princess not out of kindness, but to hide her while they looted her inheritance. How they'd systematically broken her spirit to ensure she'd never question her place or seek out her true identity. That's enough, Alpha Timothy snarled, his eyes flashing with his wolf's anger. I don't know how you faked those recordings, but... Faked? Seraphina's laugh was like winter wind. Timothy, you're standing in a room full of alphas who can sense lies. Do you really want to test whether they believe me or you? Celeste looked around desperately and saw the truth in the faces surrounding them. The gathered nobility wasn't questioning the recordings, they were questioning why they'd never suspected the truth themselves. Royal bloodline? Richard Blackwood stepped away from Celeste, his engagement ring suddenly feeling like a millstone around her finger. What royal bloodline? Allow me to introduce myself properly, Seraphina said, her voice carrying with an authority that made even the most powerful alphas in the room straighten unconsciously. I am Seraphina Sterling, daughter of Alpha King Timothy Sterling, rightful heir to the werewolf throne. The gasps that rippled through the ballroom were audible now. Several of the older alphas dropped to one knee automatically, their wolves recognizing royal authority even if their human mind struggled to process it. The Sterling line died out 20 years ago, someone protested weakly. No, Seraphina said, her gray eyes, so like her father's, now that people were looking for the resemblance, sweeping the room. The Sterling line was murdered by conspirators who wanted to divide royal power among themselves. But they made one crucial mistake. She stepped closer to Celeste, close enough that her adoptive sister could smell the deadly calm radiating from her. They let the princess live. Celeste's world was crumbling around her, but she wasn't going down without a fight. You're insane, she said, her voice rising with hysteria. This is all some elaborate delusion. Sarah was always unstable, always desperate for attention. Was I? Seraphina's voice remained perfectly level. Is that why you had to drug me to create those compromising photos? Is that why you've spent 18 years systematically destroying my self-worth? Because I was so naturally unstable? The mention of drugging sent another wave of shock through the assembled guests. Celeste felt the noose tightening around her neck, but panic made her reckless. I don't know what you're talking about. Dr. Kael Blackthorne from the Regional Medical Board might disagree, Seraphina said calmly. She's prepared to testify about the particular drug cocktail found in my system the night those photos were taken. The same cocktail that's been linked to several other cases of pack manipulation and coercion. Richard Blackwood was backing away now, his face pale with horror. Celeste, what is she talking about? Nothing. She's talking about nothing. But Celeste's voice was breaking, the perfect composure she'd maintained for years finally cracking. She's just jealous because I have everything she never could. You have nothing, Seraphina said quietly. You never did. Everything you've built is founded on lies and theft and murder. And now everyone knows it. The crowd was murmuring now, the gathered alphas and Lunas processing the implications of what they'd heard. If Seraphina's claims were true, and the evidence seemed overwhelming, then the entire power structure of their world had been built on deception. Your Highness, Alpha David from Copper Creek stepped forward, his voice respectful. What do you intend to do with this information? What any rightful monarch would do, Seraphina replied. Reclaim what was stolen. Restore justice. And ensure that those responsible for my parents' deaths face the consequences of their actions. Now wait just a minute, Alpha Timothy blustered, trying to regain control of the situation. Even if your claims are true, you can't just waltz in here and overturn centuries of tradition. Can't I? The words were spoken quietly, but they carried a weight that made every wolf in the room feel the urge to submit. Seraphina's silver wolf was close to the surface now, and her royal authority was unmistakable. You murdered my parents, she continued, her voice growing harder with each word. You stole my inheritance. You made me a slave in your house for 13 years. You sold me to pay debts that were funded by my own money. She stepped closer to Timothy, and the alpha actually stumbled backward. What exactly do you think gives you the right to tell me what I can and cannot do? Before Timothy could answer, a commotion at the ballroom doors drew everyone's attention. A familiar figure strode into the room, his presence immediately commanding despite the shocked state of the gathered crowd. Kael Blackthorne looked like he'd been through hell. His usually perfect appearance was disheveled, his eyes wild with something that might have been desperation. He swept the room until his gaze found Seraphina, and something raw and painful crossed his face. Seraphina, he breathed. Every eye in the room turned to watch their reunion. The tension was thick enough to cut, crackling between them like lightning before a storm. Seraphina turned to face him, her expression cool and controlled. Alpha Kael. How unexpected. He moved toward her, hope flickering in his storm-gray eyes. I've been looking for you everywhere. I know I made a mistake. Did you? Her voice was arctic. What mistake was that, exactly? I should have trusted you. I should have investigated instead of just believing. You should have done a lot of things. Seraphina cut him off smoothly. But you didn't. You chose to believe that I was capable of betraying you rather than considering that someone might be manipulating both of us. I know. God, I know, and I'm sorry. I've been going crazy trying to find you, trying to make this right. Make this right? Seraphina's laugh was bitter. You can't make this right, Kael. You can't undo what you said to me, how you looked at me, how you threw me away like garbage. Seraphina, please. Your Highness, she corrected coldly. And no. Whatever you think you're feeling now, whatever guilt is eating at you, it doesn't change what you did. It doesn't change who you showed yourself to be when it mattered. Kael flinched like she'd slapped him. I was wrong. I was an idiot, and I was wrong, but what we had was based on a lie, Seraphina said firmly. You thought I was some broken girl who should be grateful for your attention. You never saw me as an equal, never trusted me as a partner. The moment someone painted me as deceptive, you believed it without question. That's not true. Isn't it? Seraphina's eyes flashed with silver light. Tell me, Kael. In all the time I was in your territory, did you ever ask my opinion on pack matters? Did you ever treat me as anything more than a pretty debt payment who might warm your bed? The silence stretched between them, damning in its completeness. I thought so, Seraphina said softly. You wanted a mate, not a partner. A possession, not a queen. And what if I've changed? Kael's voice was desperate now. What if I've learned? Then you've learned a valuable lesson, Seraphina replied. But it's too late for us. The mate bond between them was screaming, pulling at both of them with vicious intensity. Seraphina could feel Kael's pain as clearly as her own, but she also felt something else, her own strength. The knowledge that she didn't need him anymore, didn't need anyone to validate her worth. Seraphina. A shot rang out, echoing through the ballroom like thunder. Seraphina moved faster than thought, her enhanced reflexes saving her life as the bullet meant for her heart grazed her shoulder instead. She spun toward the source of the attack, silver eyes blazing with fury. Celeste stood by the French doors leading to the garden, a smoking gun in her trembling hands. Behind her, 3 figures in black moved through the doorway, rogues, their red eyes marking them as the feral wolves who'd given up their humanity for bloodlust. You should have stayed dead, Celeste snarled, her perfect facade completely shattered now. I worked too hard to let you ruin everything. Celeste, Richard breathed, staring at his fiancée in horror. What have you done? What I should have done years ago. Celeste raised the gun again, but her hands were shaking too badly to aim properly. Kill the freak before she destroys everything. The rogues moved toward Seraphina with predatory intent, but something in their coordinated movement made her blood run cold. These weren't random attackers. They were working with Celeste. You recognize them, don't you? Celeste's voice was hysterical now, but triumphant. You should. They're the same rogues who killed your precious parents 20 years ago. The words hit Seraphina like a physical blow. Around the ballroom, gasps of horror rose from the assembled crowd. You've been working with them, Seraphina said, the pieces falling into place with sickening clarity. This whole time, you've been in contact with the rogues who murdered my family. Someone had to make sure you never learned the truth, Celeste laughed, the sound sharp and broken. Someone had to clean up the loose ends. The admission sent shockwaves through the room. Working with rogues was the ultimate taboo in werewolf society, punishable by death in most territories. Celeste, Alpha Timothy's voice was horrified. Tell me you didn't. I did what I had to do. Celeste screamed. For us. For our family. To protect everything we built. But the rogues were moving now, and Seraphina realized with crystal clarity that this had been the plan all along. Create chaos, reveal the truth, then eliminate her in the confusion. Too bad you won't live to enjoy your crown, the lead rogue growled, his voice barely human. Seraphina smiled, and for the first time since entering the ballroom, it was genuine. You know what, she said, rolling her shoulders as silver light began to emanate from her skin. I was hoping someone would give me an excuse to demonstrate why royal blood is something to be feared. The transformation that followed wasn't like any shift the assembled wolves had ever seen. Silver light exploded outward from Seraphina's position, and when it faded, the silver wolf standing in the center of the ballroom radiated power like a small sun. But she wasn't alone. Around the room, every wolf present felt the compulsion in their bones, the undeniable call of royal authority demanding protection for their rightful queen. As one, 40 of the most powerful werewolves in 3 states shifted and positioned themselves between Seraphina and her attackers. The reckoning had begun. Chapter 7. The blood hadn't even finished pooling on the ballroom floor when Luna Patricia Moonwater began to laugh. It wasn't the sound of hysteria or madness, it was the cold, calculated laughter of someone whose carefully laid plans had finally been exposed. Around her, 40 shifted wolves maintained their protective circle around Seraphina, while 3 dead rogues served as a reminder of what happened to those who threatened werewolf royalty. You still don't understand, do you? Patricia said, stepping over the body of the lead rogue without a flicker of emotion. You think this was Celeste's plan? My poor, stupid daughter couldn't orchestrate a birthday party, let alone a royal assassination. Seraphina, still in her magnificent silver wolf form, fixed Patricia with eyes that burned like molten silver. The Luna's words carried the weight of truth, something deeper and more sinister than a jealous sister's revenge. Mother, shut up, Celeste hissed, but Patricia ignored her. 20 years I've waited for this moment, Patricia continued, her composure cracking to reveal the venom beneath. 20 years of playing the devoted Luna, raising that little brat, pretending to care about pack welfare. Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend to love a child whose very existence threatens everything you've worked for? Alpha Timothy stepped forward, his face pale with dawning horror. Patricia, what are you saying? I'm saying that your beloved Luna has been lying to you for 2 decades, Patricia snapped. Just like she lied about Celeste's father. The silence that followed was deafening. Even the shifted wolves seemed to hold their breath. Celeste isn't your daughter, Timothy, Patricia said with cruel satisfaction. She's the daughter of Alpha Vincent Thorne, the man who helped me plan the attack that killed the royal family. Seraphina shifted back to human form, her royal authority making the air itself seem to vibrate with power. Vincent Thorne, she said, her voice carrying clearly across the ballroom. Former beta to the Crescent Moon Pack. Declared rogue 5 years ago for territory violations. Not rogue, Patricia corrected with a twisted smile. Undercover. Building an army of displaced wolves while we consolidated power through legitimate channels. The pieces were falling into place with sickening clarity. Seraphina felt Gabriel's presence behind her. He'd arrived with their forces during the attack, and his low growl confirmed her suspicions. Vincent was your father's beta, Gabriel said quietly. He had access to royal schedules, security protocols, everything needed to plan the perfect assassination. And Patricia was his inside contact, Seraphina continued, her voice growing harder with each word. The Luna who could provide information, alibis, and most importantly, a way to hide the surviving princess in plain sight. Timothy looked like he'd been gutted. All these years. Patricia, all these years you've been playing the long game, Patricia finished. Vincent needed someone on the inside of the pack structure while he built his rogue army. I needed someone with legitimate alpha status to provide cover for our operations. You were the perfect useful idiot. And Celeste? Seraphina asked. Insurance, Patricia said without a trace of maternal feeling. A backup heir in case something happened to me. Vincent's bloodline combined with my intelligence, raised to believe she deserved everything that was yours by right. Celeste made a sound like a wounded animal. Mother, you said I was special. You said I deserved. You deserved nothing, Patricia snapped. You were a tool, just like Timothy, just like this entire pack. The only difference is that you were supposed to be my tool, not some sniveling disappointment who couldn't even keep a simple girl under control. The cruelty in her voice was breathtaking. Around the ballroom, the assembled werewolf nobility watched in stunned silence as the conspiracy that had shaped their world for 2 decades unraveled before their eyes. The inheritance, Alpha David said suddenly. If you've been stealing from the royal treasury. We've been funding Vincent's operations for 20 years, Patricia confirmed. Building an army, corrupting pack officials, eliminating anyone who got too close to the truth. The money had to come from somewhere. $50 million, Seraphina said softly. My parents' life's work, their legacy for their people, used to build the very army that murdered them. Poetic justice, don't you think? Patricia's smile was razor-sharp. The royal fortune funding the royal downfall. That's when the windows exploded. Glass showered the ballroom as black-clad figures poured through every opening. Not rogues this time, these moved with military precision, their coordination speaking of extensive training. Vincent Thorne's army, finally showing themselves. Now! Patricia screamed. The battle erupted with vicious intensity. The 40 wolves who'd shifted to protect Seraphina found themselves outnumbered 3-1 as more attackers flooded in through the main doors. These weren't the mindless rogues from before, these were trained soldiers with a specific mission: eliminate the Silver Queen and anyone who stood with her. Seraphina shifted instantly, her silver wolf form blazing with royal power. Around her, the protective circle held, but barely. Gabriel fought at her right flank, his experience evident in every calculated strike. But they were being pushed back, overwhelmed by sheer numbers. Then the far wall exploded inward. Kael Blackthorne burst through the debris in his massive black wolf form, followed by what looked like half the Shadow Moon pack. Behind them came Elena, Tara, and dozens of wolves Seraphina recognized as her sworn followers from the safe house. The cavalry arrives, Gabriel panted as he ripped out the throat of an attacker. But Seraphina's attention was fixed on Kael. He'd come for her. Despite everything between them, despite her rejection, he'd brought his entire pack to fight at her side. Their eyes met across the chaos of battle, and for a moment, the mate bond flared between them like a living thing. Then Kael threw himself into the fight, cutting a bloody path toward her position. Together, he said as he reached her side, his mental voice carrying clearly despite his wolf form. Together, she agreed, pushing aside her emotional turmoil for the more immediate concern of staying alive. They moved like they'd been fighting side by side for years instead of being separated for months. Kael's brute strength complemented Seraphina's speed and healing abilities perfectly. When he left himself open for a devastating attack, her power flowed out to close his wounds. When enemies tried to overwhelm her with numbers, his fury scattered them like leaves. But even with reinforcements, the battle was brutal. Vincent's army had been planning this for years, and they fought with the desperation of wolves who knew failure meant death. There, Gabriel shouted over the chaos, pointing toward the far end of the ballroom. Vincent's here. Through the melee, Seraphina caught sight of the man who'd orchestrated her parents' murder. Alpha Vincent Thorne was massive even in human form, his scarred face twisted with rage as he directed his forces. Next to him, Patricia coordinated the attack with cold efficiency. "End this," Kael said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Go. We'll hold them." Seraphina hesitated for a heartbeat. Leaving the main battle meant leaving Kael to face overwhelming odds without her healing abilities. "Go," he repeated firmly. "Finish what they started." She went. Her path to Vincent was blocked by enemy wolves, but Seraphina's royal authority cut through them like a blade. These weren't rogues who'd lost their humanity, these were pack wolves, and their wolves recognized her birthright even if their human minds rejected it. They hesitated, fought their own instincts, and in those moments of confusion, she struck. "Vincent Thorne," she called as she approached the man who'd destroyed her family. He turned, and she saw her father's killer for the first time. He was everything she'd expected, cold, calculating, utterly without remorse. But there was something else in his eyes when he looked at her. Recognition. "You look just like her," he said conversationally. "Your mother." She had the same silver eyes, the same stubborn tilt to her chin. "Did she fight back?" Seraphina asked. "When you murdered her?" "She tried." Vincent's smile was cruel. "But she was protecting you, and that made her weak. She chose love over strategy, sentiment over survival. The same mistake you're making now. The only mistake I made was waiting this long." Their fight was brief and vicious. Vincent was experienced, brutal, and completely without honor. But Seraphina was royal blood in full fury, and she'd been trained by Gabriel Sterling himself. When Vincent's claws raked across her ribs, her healing ability kicked in instantly. When his superior size threatened to overwhelm her, her speed kept her just out of reach of his killing strikes. The end came when Vincent overcommitted to what should have been a finishing blow. Seraphina ducked under his attack, came up inside his guard, and buried her claws in his throat. "This is for my parents," she said as the light faded from his eyes. But the battle wasn't over. "Sarah." She spun toward the scream and saw Celeste charging across the ballroom, a silver knife gleaming in her hand. Not just any knife, a ceremonial blade that reeked of wolfsbane and other toxins designed to prevent healing. They collided in the center of the destroyed ballroom, rolling across broken glass and spilled blood. Celeste fought with the desperate fury of someone who had nothing left to lose, while Seraphina fought with the cold precision of someone who'd already won. "You ruined everything," Celeste sobbed as they grappled for control of the knife. "I was supposed to be special. I was supposed to matter." "You could have mattered," Seraphina said, finally managing to pin her adoptive sister to the ground. "You could have chosen to be better than them." "Easy for you to say," Celeste spat. "You're the precious princess. You're the chosen one. What was I supposed to be?" "My sister," Seraphina said simply. "If you'd wanted to be." For a moment, something flickered in Celeste's eyes. Regret, maybe, or the ghost of what might have been. Then it hardened back into hate. "I'd rather die than live in your shadow." She lunged upward with the knife, aiming for Seraphina's heart. The blade was inches from its target when Seraphina caught Celeste's wrist, stopping the strike cold. "Then live in the light," Seraphina said, and instead of ending her adoptive sister's life, she simply held her there until the fight went out of her. Around them, the battle was winding down. Vincent's army had scattered after their leader's death, and Patricia was in custody, held by two of the largest Shadow Moon warriors. "It's over," Gabriel said, approaching with obvious relief. "The conspirators are contained, the army is routed. Your Highness, you've won." Seraphina looked around the destroyed ballroom, at the blood and bodies and broken glass that represented 20 years of lies finally coming to light. Then she looked at Celeste, still pinned beneath her, tears streaming down her face. "No," she said quietly. "We've all lost enough." She stood, leaving Celeste on the ground but alive. Around them, the surviving members of the werewolf nobility waited for her judgment. According to pack law, Alpha David said carefully, treason against the royal bloodline is punishable by death. According to pack law, Seraphina agreed. But I'm not interested in more death today. She turned to face the assembled alphas, every inch the queen she'd been born to be. Patricia Moonwater, you stand accused of conspiracy to commit murder, theft of royal inheritance, and treason against the crown. Timothy Moonwater, you stand accused of willful negligence and conspiracy to conceal royal identity. Celeste Moonwater. She paused, looking down at her broken adoptive sister. You stand accused of attempted murder and conspiracy. The punishment for these crimes is traditionally execution, Gabriel said formally. Traditionally, Seraphina agreed. But tradition failed us once before. Perhaps it's time for something new. She looked at each of the accused in turn, then at Kael, who'd shifted back to human form and was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Life imprisonment, she said finally. In separate territories, under constant supervision. They'll have time to think about what they've done, and the world will have time to see that justice doesn't always require blood. Your Highness, one of the older alphas protested, showing mercy to traitors sets a dangerous precedent. Does it? Seraphina's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. Or does it show that the royal bloodline has learned from past mistakes? That power wielded with wisdom is stronger than power wielded with vengeance? The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than shocked. Around the room, she could see the gathered nobility processing not just her words, but what they meant for the future of their world. The conspirators will face pack justice, she continued. But that justice will be tempered with mercy. And this will mark the beginning of a new era, one where we choose wisdom over tradition, unity over division. She looked at Kael again, and this time she let him see the truth in her eyes. She was no longer the broken girl he'd thrown away. She was no longer the desperate woman who'd begged for his trust. She was the Silver Queen, and she would rule her way. Whether that included him remained to be seen. Chapter 8. 6 months after the bloodbath at Celeste's engagement party, Seraphina Sterling stood before the largest gathering of werewolves in recorded history and felt absolutely no fear. The irony wasn't lost on her. A year ago, she'd trembled at the thought of speaking up at a family dinner. Now, 200 alphas from across North America waited for her to address the future of their entire species. For too long, she began, her voice carrying clearly across the massive amphitheater, our society has been built on the premise that might makes right. That the strongest wolves deserve power simply because they can take it. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Some approving, others wary. Change never came easy, especially to predators who'd spent centuries at the top of the food chain. That ends today. Behind her, the restored Sterling family crest gleamed on a banner of silver and blue, the royal colors that hadn't been displayed in public for 20 years. To her right stood Gabriel, now bearing the official title of Royal Advisor. To her left, Kael Blackthorne stood in formal dress uniform, his storm gray eyes fixed on her with something that looked suspiciously like pride. He'd asked for nothing, demanded nothing, simply appeared at her side every day for 6 months and proved through actions what his words had failed to convey. The new royal charter, Seraphina continued, holding up a thick document, establishes protection for the vulnerable. Mandatory education for all pack children, regardless of birth circumstances. Oversight committees to investigate abuse within pack hierarchies. And most importantly, the right of any wolf to seek sanctuary with the crown if their pack fails to protect them. The applause was thunderous. Not universal, several of the more traditional alphas looked like they'd swallowed something sour, but loud enough to shake the rafters. Alpha David from Copper Creek stood first. Your Majesty, how do you intend to enforce these new laws? The same way any monarch enforces law, Seraphina replied calmly. Through a combination of voluntary compliance and the promise of consequences for those who choose defiance. And if the larger packs refuse to acknowledge your authority? Seraphina smiled, and there was nothing soft about it. Then they'll discover what happened to the last wolves who tried to overthrow the Sterling bloodline. The message was clear. She'd shown mercy to her adoptive family, commuting their death sentences to life imprisonment in separate territories. Patricia Moonwater was currently serving her sentence under the watchful eye of the Great Lakes Pack, while Timothy had been sent to Alaska under similar supervision. But that mercy had limits. Celeste's fate had been different. Not death, but something arguably worse for someone who'd craved attention and admiration her entire life: complete erasure from pack society. Her wolf permanently bound by royal decree, her name stricken from all records, she existed now as a warning rather than a person. The ultimate consequence for those who preyed on the innocent. What about the international implications? Asked Alpha Maria Santos from the Central American delegation. The European and Asian councils haven't recognized the restoration of the monarchy. They will. Kael spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd spent months negotiating on Seraphina's behalf. The Shadow Moon Pack has been in communication with overseas councils. They're interested in establishing formal diplomatic relations. Seraphina glanced at him, feeling the familiar warmth that bloomed whenever she watched him work. He'd spent the last 6 months becoming exactly what she needed, not a protector or a controller, but a partner. Someone who could handle the political machinations while she focused on the larger vision. The Crown recognizes that change takes time, Seraphina said, addressing the assembly again. We're not asking anyone to abandon their pack traditions overnight. We're simply asking that those traditions include basic protections for those who can't protect themselves. And what about succession? This from an elderly alpha whose pack had been loyal to the royal line before its fall. If something happens to you, the Sterling bloodline continues through any children I might have, Seraphina replied smoothly. But the monarchy itself will be transformed. Future rulers will be chosen based on merit and the will of the people, not simply accident of birth. More murmurs, these thoughtful rather than resistant. The assembled alphas were processing the implications of a merit-based royal succession, something unprecedented in werewolf history. Your Majesty, Alpha Rebecca Loveday from the Pacific Northwest raised her hand. What role will your mate play in this new government structure? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone knew about Kael's public pursuit of forgiveness, his unwavering support despite Seraphina's initial rejection. The werewolf rumor mill had been spinning for months about whether she'd actually accepted him as her mate. My mate, Seraphina said clearly, will serve as my equal partner in all decisions affecting our people. Not because tradition demands it, but because I choose to share power with someone I trust completely. She turned to face Kael directly, letting everyone see the truth in her eyes. Someone who's proven that love means supporting your partner's strength, not trying to diminish it. Kael's expression didn't change, but she caught the slight softening around his eyes. He'd waited 6 months without pushing, without demanding, simply being present and proving every day that he understood what he'd done wrong. In 3 weeks, Seraphina announced, turning back to the assembly, there will be a formal coronation ceremony. All pack leaders are invited to attend and witness the dawn of a new era. She paused, letting the weight of history settle on her words. But understand this, the ceremony is a formality. The crown has already been claimed. The new laws are already in effect. And the protection I offer to the powerless begins today. The applause this time was universal. Even the traditionalist alphas seemed to recognize that fighting the tide of change would be futile. As the assembly began to break up into smaller discussion groups, Kael moved closer to her. That went well, he said quietly. Did it? Seraphina studied the faces around them. Half of them are terrified I'll destroy everything they've built. The other half are terrified I won't destroy enough. And what are you terrified of? She considered the question seriously. A year ago, she would have said she was terrified of being abandoned again, of trusting someone who'd ultimately betray her. Now, becoming so focused on justice that I forget mercy, she said finally. Turning into the kind of ruler who sees enemies everywhere instead of people who need guidance. That won't happen. How can you be so sure? Kael's smile was soft, private. Because you just spent 6 months proving that you can hold absolute power without losing your humanity. Because you chose rehabilitation over revenge even when no one would have blamed you for taking blood. And because, he continued, stepping close enough that only she could hear, you have people around you who'll call you on it if you start going down the wrong path. People like you? People like me, he confirmed. If you'll have me. She studied his face, seeing the man he'd become over the past 6 months. Not the arrogant alpha who'd thrown her away at the first sign of trouble, but someone who'd learned to listen, to support, to trust her judgment even when it went against his instincts. "I have conditions," she said. "Name them. No more making decisions about my life without consulting me. No more assuming you know what's best for me. And absolutely no more believing random photos over my actual words." Kael winced. "I deserved that." "Yes, you did." She softened the blow with a small smile. "But I'm willing to move forward if you are." "I am." His voice was rough with emotion. "Seraphina, Sarah, I know I can't undo what I did. Can't take back the way I failed you when you needed me most. But I swear to you, I'll spend the rest of my life proving that you can trust me." "I know," she said simply. "You already have been." The mate bond between them, dormant for months under the weight of hurt and betrayal, suddenly flared to life. But it felt different now, not the desperate pull of two broken people clinging to each other, but the steady warmth of partners who'd chosen each other with full knowledge of both strengths and flaws. "So," Kael said, his voice carefully casual, "about that coronation ceremony. What about it? Will there be a king crowned alongside the queen?" Seraphina pretended to consider. "That depends. Do you know anyone qualified for the position?" "I might," he said, grinning. "He's got a decent pack, reasonable diplomatic skills, and he's absolutely devoted to supporting his queen's vision for the future." "Sounds promising. Does he understand that being king in this new monarchy means being a partner, not a ruler?" "He does. He's learned a few things about the difference between leadership and control." "Good." Seraphina reached up to touch his face, letting her fingers trace the scars that marked him as a warrior. "Because I'm not looking for someone to rule beside me. I'm looking for someone to build a better world with." "Is that a yes?" Instead of answering with words, she kissed him. Right there in front of 200 of the most powerful werewolves in North America, she claimed her mate as publicly and definitively as she'd claimed her throne. When they broke apart, the amphitheater had gone silent again. Every eye was on them, waiting to see what the new queen would do next. Seraphina smiled and took Kael's hand, their fingers interlacing naturally. 3 weeks, she announced to the assembly. Come witness the coronation of your alpha queen and the king she's chosen to stand beside her. Not above her, Kael added, his voice carrying clearly. Not behind her. Beside her, as equals building something better than what came before. The applause was deafening. Later, as they walked through the gardens outside the amphitheater, Seraphina reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the scared girl who'd scrubbed floors and begged for scraps of affection, to the woman who now held the power to reshape werewolf society. Any regrets? Kael asked, as if reading her thoughts. About which part? Any of it. All of it. She considered the question seriously. The pain, the betrayal, the months of exile and training, the blood and violence of reclaiming her birthright, it had all led to this moment. No, she said finally. I wouldn't change any of it. Even the worst parts taught me something I needed to learn. What's that? That I don't need anyone to save me, she said, squeezing his hand. But that doesn't mean I can't choose to share my life with someone who deserves it. And do I deserve it? Seraphina stopped walking and turned to face him fully. Ask me again in 50 years. If you're still choosing to stand beside me instead of trying to stand over me, I'll give you a definitive answer. Kael laughed, the sound rich with joy. I love you, Your Majesty. I love you too, she replied. My king. And as they walked toward their future together, equals, partners, mates in the truest sense, Seraphina felt something she'd never experienced before. Complete and utter peace with exactly who she was. The Silver Queen had claimed her crown, her mate, and her destiny. And she was just getting started. Thank you for listening to this story. Subscribe, like and share for more.